All right, guys, welcome back to another conversation. And I'm talking with somebody who I've been wanting to talk to for a long time. So thank you, Laura, for joining me today to have a conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to do this.
No, of course. So I remember when I first heard you on a podcast about 2 years ago on the Modern Wisdom podcast. And I was just scrolling through podcasts. I needed something to listen to. And I came across yours, and I was really intrigued by the title. And as I was listening to the podcast, I found out that he was talking to you about your book, Tranquility by Tuesday. And since then, I've watched your TED Talk. I'm subscribed to your blog. I've read your other books. I've read All the Money in the World. I've read 168 Hours because I really appreciate your view on everything that you talk about. And, you know, the way that you have always, the way that you see and view time is something that was just fascinating to me. And then being able to understand it's something that you've been passionate about and studying, and it just was really eye-opening to the things that I've learned about time, being a former football player and having kids and trying to just navigate what time is like, and just being able to read your material and watch your TED Talk has really changed my life. So I'm really, really excited to speak with you about that today.
Thank you.
Of course. So the first thing I want to talk about, there are a couple of things I want to talk to you about. And the first thing I want to talk about is understanding priorities. It's something that I feel like I've really, really struggled with in the past few years, having kids, being married, and really trying to transition from the way that I view priorities, being a football player, to being a husband, a father, a business owner, and wearing all these different hats. And the way that I've always viewed priorities was you get your priorities based on the roles that you have in your life, right? So it's like, I'm a husband, I'm a father, business owner. I want to stay in shape and work out. I love self-development. And it's really difficult to try to navigate which one should come first based on what the need is within that role, right? And it's something that's really, really difficult to understand, because if I have a lot to do at work, it feels like I should prioritize that at work, especially being an entrepreneur. But if I haven't spent a lot of time with my wife, and even though we're not verbally communicating that we should be prioritizing each other, that pressure is felt to try to prioritize that thing. Same thing with kids, wanting to stay healthy, and also working on myself to work on some like self-development things, right? So the one thing I'm wondering is, do you think it's possible that we can prioritize our priorities when we have so many things to juggle?
When we have to rank all of them. Well, the good news is I really do think that time is big enough that we don't have to make the kind of harsh trade-offs that a lot of people think are required. Like, you know, how can I have so many things that I want to do in my life? And it's like, or people like, oh, well, you have to pick 2 or pick 3 at any given moment to focus on. And so if you're killing it in the business running part, you're neglecting your wife and kids. Or if you're, deciding to be in great shape, the business is falling by the wayside. And I don't actually think that needs to be the case, because there are 168 hours in a week. And when you actually plot out how people tend to spend those hours, there generally is space for prioritizing time with family, for seeing friends, for exercising, for getting enough sleep, for doing the things at work that are going to move the business forward. And so, there's lots of ways to kind of approach this. One of the first things I always tell people to do is to try keeping track of your time for a week, which is 168 hours, just to see where it's really going. Because a lot of times people have told themselves this stories like, oh, there is no time for, building my business if I'm also trying to be a good parent and a good spouse. There's not enough time to exercise given how I have going on. And then you actually keep track of a week and you start to see, maybe there's a little bit of time here and there. It might not be a ton. I'm not saying people have hours and hours in the day that they didn't even know existed. But if your goal is could I spend, 20 minutes with each of my kids, 3 or 4 times a week? Well, probably we could figure out how to make that work. That's only, if you have 3 kids, that's like an hour each time, 4 times a week. That's only 4 hours. But that individual time would be so amazing. Or for exercise, for instance, it's not going to be like when you are playing football professionally. Obviously, we're not going to put that much time into it. But if your goal is like 45 minutes a day, multiply that times 7. I mean, we're talking 5 hours in a week. Can we find that out of 168? Well, probably we can find the time. So approaching it from a perspective of possibility and abundance, I think changes the question from like, am I prioritizing the right thing right now? It's like, well, as long as I'm touching on all of these things and doing so regularly, it will probably be okay over the longer period of time.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, especially with your second rule, which is my favorite rule in Tranquility by Tuesdays, planning on Fridays. Because that's when I realized that, okay, if I just get a bird's eye view of what's going on, then I know how to I guess prioritize it during the week. But I remember hearing you talk about in 168 hours breaking down like how you got that number, and it's like it's simple math. We just understand like what the hours are when we're sleeping versus being up and all the things that the 168 hours entail. But as you're talking, what's interesting to me is you're saying that we can almost subside priority by understanding the time that we have to actually prioritize the things in our lives, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it also, getting back to that idea of planning on Friday and getting the bird's eye view of your week. I mean, one of the good things you can do if you do that is make yourself a priority list for the upcoming week that actually has all these categories that you might want to focus on. Right. So, thinking about the upcoming week, what are my professional priorities? Well, probably most people listening to this have figured out that they have work to do for the next week that they need to do. But then in other categories too, like let's say relationships is a category. What are my top priorities for the next week in that category? And then when you think about it, you're like, okay, well, I'm looking at my calendar. One of my kids has this big event that I want to be at and want to really, help them prepare for and celebrate afterwards or something like that. So that would be a priority. And maybe, if you and your spouse feel like you haven't been talking a whole lot, maybe it's that, after the kids go to bed 2 nights during the week, you're going to really sit down and have a good conversation together, kick back, relax, instead of just watching screens or, collapsing in bed or whatever it is, but prioritizing that. And then you say, okay, for myself, what are my top priorities over the next week for my own physical, mental, spiritual, emotional health? What would be most important for me to do? And if you make that priority list in multiple categories and then figure out where you can plot these things in over the course of the week, I think you'll feel like you have a lot more balanced life because it's all getting there. I mean, it's all there. You're not saying, oh, well, because I have a big deadline at work, I can't exercise. It's like, okay, no, we're executing on that big deadline for Thursday. And we've also decided that Tuesday morning, we're going to do something, for physical fitness, and Saturday and Sunday we're going to. And then, wow, we've done all of it.
No, 100%. Like ever since I read your book 2 years ago, the planning on Fridays has really changed in my life because it's helped me understand that I can get a lot more done. What it really has done, honestly, is realizing how much of my feelings and emotions got in the way to me actually just being able to do what it is that I want to do. I think when we think about all the things that need to be done or that we want to be done, it's actually really doable. Because it's also freeing to know that, well, I actually can't do that, but I probably can do it next week. And the urgency that I put on it being done this week really isn't all that important. I would love for you to explain how you break down the planning on Fridays, because obviously you can do it a lot better than I would do.
Yeah. Well, if your listeners are wondering, well, what is this magical planning on Fridays? I mean, first to answer the question, why on earth Fridays? Because a lot of people are like, well, I plan on Monday mornings or I plan on Sunday nights. And if you have a great weekly planning time, I don't mean to tell anyone that they're wrong. I mean, you should stick with what's working for you. But I do think that everyone needs a designated weekly planning time. And that is because we live our lives in weeks. Like that is the cycle of life. Like you sort of think about what unit of time keeps repeating and looks like the whole picture of your life. It's going to be a week. And so we want a time where we look at the whole week at once so we can plan holistically. So if we do have that big deadline on Thursday, we're not only focused on that. We can look at the whole of the week instead of just that. But then, and Friday is just a good time because most people aren't doing anything on Friday. Friday night, Friday afternoon, you're like, it's almost the weekend. I can't start anything. But you might be willing to think about what future you should do and turn what could be wasted time into some very productive minutes. But anyway, you sit down, you look at your calendar. If you have a work calendar and a personal calendar, get them both. Or if you just have one calendar, look at that. Look at what is, look at the next week and say, given everything that is going on, and also given my long-term goals, what is most important for me to do next week? And then, make that list in the 3 categories or whatever. If you have more categories, that's great. But for many people, career, relationships, and self tend to be a pretty comprehensive set of categories. Looking at your calendar, looking at your goals, choose a couple things. And ideally, you don't want to choose things that you're not going to do.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And that's really hard to do in the beginning too.
It's hard to do in the beginning because you need to have a good sense of what can actually fit in a week, which is why it is a good idea to start with tracking your time, because you start to see what can fit in a week and what can't. So you're not going to be like, I'm going to write a book next week. Like, no, you are not. But, could you go back, if somebody has been keeping a blog, go back through your old blog posts and see which ones got the most traffic, so you can look at those ideas for things you might want to develop more. Okay, that is something you could do in the course of a week. But yeah, just a couple items in each. Figure out where those priorities can go. And then, look at what else is on your plate for the next week. Like, what other obligations have you signed on for? Again, looking at your calendar. What do I also need to do professionally? Do I have all the logistics worked out for that? Do I need any help? Do I need to make anything happen to do that? Is there anything not on my calendar that I'd like to see there? And then repeat that process for relationships, for self. You end with your marching orders for the upcoming week. And then, but the key thing is you have to keep doing this. Yeah. Yeah. Because, you do it one Friday, your life is not going to magically change.
Yeah.
But if you keep doing it every Friday, first it'll start taking a lot less time because you already have stuff on your calendar that is sort of steps toward your goals. So you don't have to keep putting it on there. And then you also can check back in and refine your process. Yeah. So you can see it on Friday when you're looking back, did I do this stuff that I set out to do? And if you did, awesome. If you did not, then it's time to refine the model and say, well, why did I not? Was it because I took on too much? That's pretty close to always the case at the beginning, right?
In the beginning,
I overestimated what I could do in a week. Okay. Need to pare it back. Yeah. Or I thought the week would be perfect and I didn't realize that life would happen as life always happens. And I needed to plan for that. So that's what we do. We do it week after week and life gets a lot more orderly.
Yeah, 100%. And I think my experience when I started this 2 years ago is that the big thing that I had to figure out when planning on Fridays, and like you said, you can plan on any day that works for you, but Fridays is what we do because I think it's the best. So, but when you plan out your day, I had to figure out what material I was going to use to do that. So it was am I going to use my phone? Am I going to use a digital planner? And that was even just something that I had to wrestle through to figure out how I was going to do this consistently. And that in itself is something you want to iron out in the beginning. When you were doing your studies and you are helping people now, is that something that they are trying to figure out how they actually want to plan their days?
Yeah. Well, so with planning, the tools are generally not as important as the process.
Really?
You want to have tools that you will use. Yeah. But, the world's fanciest planner will not organize your life for you. Yeah. Right. So, whatever amazing calendar tools we have now, again, that can't tell you what you should choose to spend your time on. Once you decide to spend your time on it, you can have all the details in there and all that, but it can't do it for you, at least not yet. I know, who knows?
Who knows? I know.
We might be getting closer.
I know. One thing that you said I think is important that I wanted to ask you is, you say life happens and sometimes you realize you overplanned and you overestimated how much you get done in a week. But sometimes when you when I got really good at it, life still would happen and I'm oh man, this didn't go well, and now my daughter got sick or something came up from work, and now the whole day feels like it's crashing and burning, and now the whole week is just done. That's what I really, really struggled with in the beginning, because as a professional football player, it's it was super regimented, and no matter what happened, the team was going on, so I was going on too. Whereas as a father and a husband and a business owner, it's not like that. It's something happens, you still got to wake up and finish the plan. And I struggle with that. So what would you say to somebody who is feeling really good about planning out their week on Friday, Tuesday comes up, the baby gets sick, and now it's that now everything is over.
Well, everything is not over. I want to first tell you that. I mean, we have a couple of things here. I mean, one is we cannot expect life to go perfectly. If we do, we are just going to be constantly disappointed, and that is no way to go through life. I'm a very optimistic person, but when it comes to time management, I put on my pessimist hat. And I say things are going to go wrong. All kinds of stuff is going to go wrong in the course of the week. It is not a surprise that there is traffic. It is not a surprise that a flight gets delayed or canceled. It is not a surprise that a child gets sick. It's not a surprise that you get sick. It's not a surprise that, somebody you were expecting to deliver something, a vendor working with you, they had a family emergency. It is not a surprise that, the power goes out somewhere. All these things can happen. And so we want to construct lives where we can keep moving forward, even when life happens sort of within the normal range of the things that go wrong. Now, obviously, there's certainly, if, an asteroid falls on your house, that's a totally different matter. But within the sort of 90th% confidence interval here, the things we could guess would happen. Yeah. And so the key for that is to limit the amount of things you're taking on. Right? Because if you have every single minute spoken for in the upcoming week, when something happens, it will displace something. But if every minute is not spoken for, if there is open space, then when things happen, they don't necessarily have to displace those other things, right? Because there's a spot for it. So just as an example, you've got your week, and you have a certain number of things you were planning on doing for your business on Tuesday. And then your biggest client calls Tuesday morning, is like, look, we got to deal with this project you were on. There's something that's gone very wrong. Well, you're probably going to deal with that, right? That's something most people would do. But then where does all this stuff that was going to happen Tuesday go? Well, if you have open space in your schedule, let's say you consciously don't put a whole lot of stuff on Friday. Now everything that was supposed to happen Tuesday can hopefully get rescheduled for Friday. Not everything, because some people won't be able to if it involves anyone else. But if it's like work that you were doing or things that could happen at different points, now you can reschedule that all till Friday. And it's still happening, right? It's still happening. We don't have to borrow time from the next week, which is going to have crises of its own. Right? Yeah.
And I think you said that perfectly, because I'll never forget this. This is when I was doing like what I've learned from your book. I was working with a brand, and I had to show the brand my schedule because it was about like what I had to do during that week. And the brand got back to me and said, hey, can you fill up the schedule more? You don't look busy. And that blew my mind. That blew my mind. So it just shows that there's this perception that if your calendar isn't filled with stuff, you're not busy. And going to what you're saying, it's like when you actually prioritize things, when you look at your week and realize what you want to prioritize, you actually realize you have more space than you think. And then if something goes wrong, you can fill it up with when something goes wrong, you can do it with the space, with the time that you have left in the week. Yeah. But I'll never forget when they made me feel, I'm just like, hilarious. Okay. Like, I guess I'm not busy enough.
No, we need you to look busy. Like, who cares what you're actually getting done? Just put some random meetings in there.
Yeah. And I even think that's just bizarre. It's like, well, just look busy by having no time. I'm like, okay, I guess so. Like, I guess I'll do that. I can't argue with you.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to talk to you about was really understanding like so one thing I find fascinating about your work is like how we can combat distraction. And it's not really about getting rid of it, but combating it. And the way you describe that is effortful before effortless. And I remember when I read this chapter, I had to like put the book down and be like, man, like this is so fascinating, because I've always felt like you got to just cold turkey cut it off, and most of the time that just doesn't work. Can you explain in depth like what effortful before effortless really means?
Yeah, so I think of effortful before effortless. There are two kinds of leisure. Okay, so there is leisure that is effortless, which means that you don't have to really plan it ahead. You can do however much time you want. It doesn't necessarily involve other people. You could be in, your pajamas on the couch. So that tends to be watching television. It tends to be scrolling around online. And these things are fun, but they're completely effortless, and that's why people do them. Then there is fun that is effortful. So this tends to involve a little bit of planning, a little bit of intention. There might be other people. You might have to wear clothes. I don't know. I mean, things are, there's all sorts of requirements on it, but it could be something like calling a friend. It could be reading a book. I mean, that doesn't, you can be in your pajamas for that, but it's taking more mental effort. You could be doing a hobby. You could be, playing in a pickleball league. I don't know, whatever it is that you want to do. But those things require effort on your part. Yeah. And it's curious because whenever I ask people, what do you wish you had more time for in your life? What do you feel like you never do enough of? They are almost always listing things in the effortful fun category, right? Like, I wish I got to hang out with my friends more. I wish I got to do, play golf. I wish I got to, go to the gym more. I wish I got to read. I used to read all the time and I haven't since I've had kids, or, all these things that people want to do more of. It's almost universally in the effortful category. And this always strikes me as odd because I've seen a lot of time diaries. I've seen thousands of people's schedules, and everybody has some discretionary time. It may not be a ton, but it is never zero. But the problem is when we have discretionary time, what do we do? Well, if we haven't thought about it ahead of time, we are highly likely to choose effortless. Leisure in that moment. And so, it's like you got the kids to bed and you're like, flip on the TV, or you are, have 30 minutes until the carpool brings the kids home from soccer. And you're like, okay, I'm just scrolling around online and looking at social media. And I mean, I know some people do social media professionally, but these things are filling our time. So I don't mean for anyone to cut it cold turkey. I know there's a lot of amazing things. I mean, you've got great Instagram videos if people want to go watch those. But what you could do to get more of a balance is to challenge yourself to do a little bit of effortful fun before effortless. So when you're going to pick up your phone to go watch you on Instagram, first just open a book for like a couple minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, read your ebook or read your paperback, and then you can go online. Or, call a friend before you turn on Netflix. Or if you've got a hobby, like you want to do, woodworking or something, like do that for 20 minutes and then go watch TV. And if you do these things, like often what happens is people just keep going with the effortful fun because it's fun. Like, these things are fun once you get into them. It's just the initial effort. But even if you don't, even if you read a book for 5 minutes and then go scroll around online, you've gotten to do both. Right? Yeah. Like you've made space in your life for this other kind of fun that people almost universally think is not happening enough of in their lives.
Yeah. And when I started practicing this, I realized that I'm going to just, read my Kindle for 20 minutes before I go log on Instagram. Next thing you know, I look up, it's been an hour and 20 minutes and I'm reading because I'm immersed in the book. And most of the time, in my life, at least, that when the effortful leisure is always tied to a goal or a habit in mind that I want to get better at anyway. So that's why when I heard this concept, I was like, man, this is fascinating. I'm going to try this. And it was really difficult in the beginning because the effortless stuff is reaction. It's all like off a reaction. It's easy to pick up your phone and to play the video game or whatever, but it's harder to pick up a book, or it's harder to go do a 20-minute, high intensity interval workout versus doing something else. And I'm just so curious, where did you come up with this concept? And do you see it as a practice is more about personal development or avoiding the addiction to effortless activities?
I think it's more about people often have these grand ideas of how they're going to change their life, right? And we're gonna change everything. Like we're gonna be an entirely different person, next week than we are now. And that's a lot to ask because we are who we are for a reason. And so I'm always just trying to get people to change things a little bit around the margin. And so something like deciding what you want to do for the beginning of your leisure time. It's not a huge ask. I'm not asking anyone to give up TV. I'm not asking anyone to sign off of all social media platforms. I'm just suggesting that if, your leisure is feeling a little bit unbalanced in your life, that there is this little tweak that would allow you to spend more time on the fun that you keep saying you would like to have. And so, it's just an easier way to go about self-transformation versus trying to, cut anything out of your life immediately.
I find it interesting that you say it an easier way, because the one thing that I've learned just throughout my life, and especially when consuming your content and consuming your products, like your books and stuff, is knowing about time is great, tracking it and understanding that we all have the same amount of time in the week. Like, like the big alpha guys online, like wake up at 1 a.m, like get after. It's like, okay, like that's one approach. But at the end of the day, when you understand that you can prioritize your time and you can manage your time and you can come up with these plans. But at the end of the day, it takes some level of discipline to do these things, right? Like I didn't get to the NFL by just waking up and deciding not to eat healthy and do the workout. It took discipline, and discipline can be a really intimidating word for people, because I think when you hear it, it's discipline, which means you have to understand time, which means there's a plan, which means there's accountability to yourself before the people to follow that. And I just believe that we have a really unhealthy relationship with discipline now, because I think with social media, all people are seeing is in results to something or to someone who put a lot of work, which takes discipline to achieve that thing, and there's like these expectations to have that without doing the work. And when you go to do the work, you realize that this is a lot harder than what I thought. Now I don't really know if I can like do this, because it takes like managing your time and understanding your time and all the things that you have shared and that you teach. Do you think that like when you hear the word, you instinctively know it, like I said, but do you think that we can reshape our relationship with discipline so it feels more empowering rather than restrictive?
I absolutely do. And I'm glad you're putting it that way. I'm always wondering about the people who are saying like, you should go take this cold showers so you're more disciplined. I'm like, okay, has life been so easy for you that you need to manufacture suffering in order to like, I think anyone who's ever, dealt with a serious illness or had family members going through something terrible, or, people who have done work that involves, being in uncomfortable situations or anything like that. It's like, you don't have to manufacture like this. You've gone through this. And so I find that a little bit strange. Those things that people are talking about, or waking up at like 3 a.m. It's like, okay.
Have you seen the video that's been like super viral lately?
No.
There's this guy on Twitter who's like posted a video, and it's him waking up at like 2 a.m, and he starts his day by like filling up a bowl of water with ice and like using bottled water, puts his face in it, and then he like opens up a banana, rubs his face with the banana, goes out on the porch and breathes. It's like 3 a.m. I'm just is this, there's no way this is for real.
Yeah,
like, this
is probably like real. Just tweaking all of us who are, into those sorts of morning routine concepts. Which I will mock too. I mean, I've written a ton of those stories, and I also would like mock myself for doing it sometimes. And I don't wake up that early, but it's because I think you have to decide, like, what do you want to have in your life? Where can these things fit? Now, there are a great many people, like if you have a job that has an hour-long commute and, you want to see your family when you get home from it, the only time a lot of that stuff will fit is 5 a.m. in the morning. And so then you have to decide, like, is that worth it to me to do? But if your life doesn't look like that, and, mine doesn't, then you do stuff at other times. I run in the afternoon if I'm going to go for a run. I don't need to wake up at 5 a.m. to do it. But you said discipline. I think it's more about... I mean, at the root of it being like disciple, right? And you are following a path. And a path doesn't have to be, somebody like, beating you with a stick to get you to go on it. It's that you're choosing this path, right? The following this path. And I think, the more we can embrace that idea is that I'm doing this for myself and doing this to become the kind of person I want to be. The more it sounds appealing, as opposed to, something I'm doing to punish myself. And I also really do suggest that people can do a lot in the long haul, even by doing just a little bit at a time. So, if you, because people who think that they aren't disciplined and can't develop good habits or anything like this, that I can't keep habits. I can't keep resolutions if I do. People who say that have probably managed to brush their teeth the vast majority of days, right? Like they get up and brush their teeth in the morning, probably do it before they go to bed. And it's not that, they have ironclad discipline, which is making them brush their teeth every day. It's just that it's not a very difficult habit, and it doesn't take that long. And you make it happen even when you're traveling. Like, you take your toothbrush with you. Like, this is not, we don't need to overthink it. And so especially if you can come up with habits that are moving you toward your long-term goals, but are very easy and small, as long as you stick with them, you will get somewhere. And so anything big that you want to do, you want to write a book, like, well, you could try to do it in a week, but that probably won't work. However, you could also try to write 250 words a day. And if you are writing 250 words a day for a year, you will have a book.
100%.
100%.
Man. So let's say, for example, like, I wanted to write a book, right? And I want to write this book, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to go after writing this book. I'm going to write 250 words every 3 times a week. And I'm doing this, and I realize how much I don't enjoy it. Is that me realizing that I actually don't have a desire to actually write a book?
Yep. I will say that. Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that you couldn't change your incentives at some point. Because people do things for all kinds of reasons. Most people show up at work 240 times a year, whether they really deeply desire it or not. But, there are other incentives, and we want to feed our families. But with things that are not required, you don't have to do them.
Oh, my God, please say that again.
Yeah, we just blow our minds here.
Yeah.
Because it may be that there are other ways. Like, maybe you have a message you want to share with people. Yeah. Like, okay, some people share that message by writing a book. Other people do it by doing a series of videos. Other people would do it by giving a speech in lots of different places. Other people would do it, in short newsletter forms somewhere. There's lots of ways to share an idea, and it doesn't have to all come packaged in a 60,000 word, bound version of it. So, and then who knows? Like, maybe you write 100 newsletters on a topic because it's so exciting to you, and then at the end you just like paste them all together. Like, there's the book, right? So, 100%. It could work that way too.
Yeah, because I think when trying to understand it being empowering versus restrictive, I think that's so subjective based on what you're trying to do. And I think you said something beautiful, honestly, when it comes to, if you want to try something one way, it's always us trying to express ourselves. There's a lot of different ways to express ourselves. So if 250 words 3 times a week isn't doing it for you, it doesn't mean you don't want to get the message out. You probably just don't want to write a book. So try doing it in a video format or a podcast format, or even just writing to yourself. You know what I mean? Like, when I got into this creative space, I had to really figure out what it is that I was trying to share, because I had a lot to share. And there were some formats that just didn't work for me. And originally I was like, well, I guess I don't really have anything to say, or I guess I don't really care. But that feeling never left me. And once I understood that I can express it or say it or communicate it in a different way, I just realized that there was a way to be empowered. And through empowerment, I think discipline almost isn't really I guess the way that discipline is portrayed in society today, that feeling goes away, because now it's like that old saying is like, you want to have a job that doesn't feel like work. I think that it's the same thing with discipline for yourself. It's like, you want to be doing things that doesn't feel like it's a task, or you just don't enjoy it. Yeah.
And I love writing. I mean, so for me, like, saying write 250 words a day, I'm like, is that all? Like, can I do more? would that be okay? And so, but if you don't feel that way, then it's entirely different. It's not that I'm more disciplined than anyone else about writing books. It's that I love to write. There's plenty of other things I have zero desire to do whatsoever.
And so do you think if people feel that discipline is restrictive, what should they do?
I think that you can look at what you're doing and see if there are ways that you can modify your approach toward any goals that you are truly trying to achieve. And even goals could be revisited. Sometimes people set goals that aren't really their own goals. they're from somewhere else. Somebody else said they wanted to do it, so you're like, oh, that sounds cool. Or maybe your parents thought that was a good thing growing up, or maybe you've just know that successful people all run marathons or something. And so you're like, well, I better do that if I want to be successful. So but we want to look at the goals and say, well, which ones actually excite us or feel important enough for like deeply held values that we're willing to push past just a little bit of discomfort in order to achieve them. And then, if there is something that is a truly deeply held goal, but the approach you're taking is not doing it for you, then you could try a different approach. I mean, maybe it's that you don't want to do something by yourself, but if you were training for that marathon with a friend, it would be an entirely different experience. Or maybe you don't want to write that book by yourself, but writing it with somebody makes it feel more like a give and take in a conversation versus just, sitting down and cranking out words. Or maybe it's something else. Maybe that you want feedback from people. And if you're not getting feedback, it's hard to stick with it. But if you're, putting your steps out there publicly, then people weigh in and you like that. You like the give and take. And, you have to figure out what is motivational to you. And I think once you get that in place, and then give yourself some runway too. Like, I mean, people also just quit stuff when it doesn't work the first time. And well, okay, lots of things don't work the first time. We could also try a second time or a third time. And then maybe, by the 10th time, if it's still terrible, like, okay, fine, like go on and try something else. But, give yourself at least enough space to see if this is something you want to do.
Do you see, because you've been studying people's times and journals for a long time, do you see a difference in how people would set goals when you were doing your study versus now with the excess of information and people that people have online?
Yeah, I mean, when I was starting to write about this topic, it was the very sort of early days of social media. And so people do sometimes ask me, has how we spend time changed entirely? And I'm like, well, we still have 24 hours in a day. We still have 168 hours in a week. Most people do not spend much of their leisure time intentionally. So something is going to fill that. It was probably more random scrolling around cable in the past. Maybe it's less of that now. Now it's more online, but it's still, stuff filling time. And yeah, so I don't know. I mean, people have been wasting time probably since we were staring at cave walls. So I don't think it's time hasn't changed entirely.
And have you seen a difference in like how people goals have changed because they have like I think what you said is so true for a lot of people is like, oh, it looks like successful people runs marathons, so I'm going to go run a marathon now. Does that happen more often than not?
I think there are probably some things that people change their peer group when they are looking at social media, right? That in the past, it was probably more like the successful people in your neighborhood and the successful people in your community and the family in your church who seems to have it all together and whatever, like the guy who's the up and comer at work. Those were your reference points, and you may have felt inferior looking at them. But now we can feel inferior looking at people with all sorts of other stuff going on, like the people who are billionaires, who are the top of the heap professionally, the most beautiful people in the world. Like you can see their pictures all the time online. So you're not just looking at yourself compared to the people around you, but all the movie stars and stuff. So I think there is that. And so probably there are some unrealistic ideas of what you can do. But on the other hand, I kind of feel like there's been unrealistic ideas for all of humanity about what you can do with your time, what you can do with your life. I mean, it may be that we can feel worse about ourselves in comparison to some of it, but I don't know. I don't know that it's because if we're keeping up with the Kardashians versus the Joneses, maybe there are more people who want to set goals for certain levels of wealth or fame or attractiveness or whatever that aren't ever going to happen. But I imagine that we could do that without social media too.
Yeah. And that's I find that so interesting because I think like when you really pay attention, like history repeats itself, right? And I think we're saying the same thing here. Everybody has struggled with time. Everybody has filled up their leisure time by not being productive or filling it with effortless fun, and it's all the same thing. And it's just at the end of the day, it's like understanding we all have 168 hours in the week. We all can plan our time. We all can it's all responsibility. It's the most important thing. And I love what you said about the discipline being disciple, right? Like I just love that because I think it brings this warmth to the word that I think everybody desires, because everybody wants control of their life, which means you got to be in control of your time, because again, we all have 24 hours in a day. And it's unfortunate that like that's like a phrase that's been taken, like, you got 24 hours in a day, you got to get up and go run. And I'm just like, yo, relax. Like, let me just figure out like what I want to do, and like let me just go from there. And that's why I think the excess of information, which really means people, and like people can say whatever they want, they can portray that they're like got it all together, but we really don't know. You know what I mean? But that's been a problem since the beginning of time.
I am sure.
Do you think that like with all the things with AI, that things will change, or you think it's all just be the same?
It's hard to know, right? Like, I mean, I can say that any new technology is going to probably, you know, it can't change human nature. And you know, there's the hilarious, what was it, the Onion, the satirical newspaper, The Onion. They had that book, Our Dumb Century, and like one of the things when their article on television coming out, they're like, you know, people to be geniuses by, you know, 1977, education to be obsolete, you know, thanks to this wonderful new thing of television, like, because you could learn anything. And because you could learn anything. You could also watch a lot of ridiculous brain rotting stuff. And I think it's the same thing with the internet. Like, I mean, isn't it amazing? Like, we can do all sorts of cool things, access all the information from the world's libraries. Are most people accessing all the information from the world's libraries? No, they are not. No, they are you know, looking at dog videos on Instagram. And so I do think that AI has some great possibilities, you know, in terms of making certain sorts of work quicker. You know, like that's great. I think that there will be some really cool breakthroughs on that front, and I can't wait to see what they are. I'm not sure that it's going to completely rewrite who we are as people. I think we're still going to have to choose how to spend our time, and we're going to still, you know, struggle with wanting to do stuff that's easy.
Yeah, and you took the words right out of my mouth, because at the end of the day, it comes back to managing your time. And a lot of the times when new technology comes out, people are hoping that it fixes the whole entire problem. But once something comes out, you have to learn how to use that thing it's a tool at the end of the day. It's just a tool, and you just need to just use it as a tool. So yeah, I was wondering, like, I wonder what Laura thinks about all this like time management. Like, have you seen like some of the apps? It's like, you don't have to worry about your schedule. Just say two things and like makes your schedule for you. I'm like, this thing doesn't know me. Like, I got kids. You know what I mean?
Did your kids follow the schedule that the AI created for them? I'm not sure that they did. Who knows?
Yeah. So no. Well, thank you so much. Like, I really, really enjoyed this. And like I said, I've been a fan of yours for a really long time. And when I genuinely mean this, like, your books have changed my life. Like, I really struggled when I got out of playing football, because everything was done for me. Like, you wake up, you go to the facility, the whole thing was on the screens. And like, we had like 7:15, 7:30 breakfast, 7:45 to 8:15 first meeting, 8:25. It was like really, really regimented that way, which makes sense, because it's at the end of the day, it's an organization, and people in that organization everybody has a specific job. And when I got into like my life after football, having babies and realizing like they ain't listening to nobody, like they gonna do what they want, and then being married and moving into a home, that I really went into a kind of a dark space, because I felt like my life was kind of just falling. And then when I read your stuff and I just saw how practical it was, but also knowing that it takes work, it changed my life. Like, it really, really has. I can't tell you how many people I'm like, yo, plan your day on Friday. I'm telling you, do it on Friday. Well, but thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm flattered. That's wonderful. Yeah, I know. I'm laughing at the idea of the baby knowing to do exactly what it's supposed to from 8:15 to 8:30. It's like, I guess he didn't get that memo.
I know. So where can people find you? I know we're about to go and do your podcast before breakfast.
I know, this
and
is
I can't
great.
wait
We get
for
to
that.
interview each other. I turn around here, but they can find me. My website is lauravanderkam.com. Just my name. There's information there about my books. You can check out any of that, any of my other writings, and I hope to see people there.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks for having me.
Everything works out the way it's supposed to. The way it's